controversial. Well, if you're in the show already, so it should hopefully not too controversial for you. But let's talk a little bit about, we have Yom HaTzmaut coming up. It's worth understanding a little bit of the background, the halachic discussions regarding this day. I'll just say by way of introduction, sometimes people get bogged down on small details. Details are important. The litmus test of a person's commitment to the state of Israel, commitment to Eretz Israel, is not whether they say Hallel with a bracha on Yom HaTzmaut or not. The minhag of the shul is to say Hallel on Yom HaTzmaut with the bracha. That is the tradition that I've received from my Rebbeim as well. And it's an important discussion, but it's not, whether you say Hallel or not, whether you say a bracha or not. There are some people who are very, very strong supporters of the state, some very strong Zionists who did not say Hallel, who did not say a bracha. Rav Soloveitchik did not say Hallel with a bracha on Yom HaTzmaut. Rav Avadia writes that you should say Hallel, but without a bracha. It's a halachic sugya, and then it has halachic criteria which go with it. One needs to learn those. One needs to understand what they are. That is one part of the discussion. It's important to have that discussion. As a broader sense, to have an appreciation of the day, something that I think, Rov Minyan V'Binyan of Rabbanei Israel would agree that there's something that happened here, and there's an element of Hakarat HaTov that we have to have to HaKadosh Baruch Hu for where we are, for what we've been through, and what the gifts that we've received. Whether that expression of Hakarat HaTov boils down to Hallel or not, with a bracha or not, that is a secondary discussion. But that is primary. In terms of the day itself of Yom HaTzmaut, so the question which is discussed in Halakha, can we celebrate a quote unquote Yom Tov nowadays that is not mentioned in the Torah? Can we add in a new day? And this has many expressions. One of them would be whether we say Hallel. It's not exclusively dependent on that. It's not the only issue. For example, the Minhagei Avelut of Sfirat HaOmer, shaving, haircuts, music, etc. Are those suspended or not? If we understand that it is somewhat of a Yom Tov, then those would be suspended for the sake of Yom HaTzmaut, right? Whether the character that the state should have, is it meant to be some sort of a Yom Tov? Do we have the authority in our days to add on a new day to the calendar that was not there before? So the Ramban writes that adding on, making up a new Yom Tov would be an issur of Bal Tosif. We know from the Torah it says Bal Tosif. You cannot add on mitzvot. You cannot add in new things that are not written in the Torah. One of the examples talks about, we see in the Tanakh, Yerovam made up a Yom Tov by himself, and that would be a violation. That would be a violation of Bal Tosif. The question is, over here, we're not just making something up. We're not just adding something up by ourselves. Something happened, right? Something happened historically. There was the hand of Hashem. There was a great Hatzalah. There was a great Yeshua that took place for Am Yisrael. And, we have this is not without precedent. There's a festival we all celebrate, you may have heard of, called Purim. Right? There's another one you may have heard of called Hanukkah, which were added in right after the time. These are chagim, which are not, it's not really accurate to call them chagim, because the word chag relates to the korban chagiga, but these are festivals which were added in later, midrabanan, based on the events that happened. And the truth is, it's not just Purim and Hanukkah. We have Purim and Hanukkah, the two that we still celebrate today, the two remnants of what's called Megillat Ta'anit. Right? And we have this is one of the earliest parts of Torah Sheba'al Peh, which was written down. Megillat Ta'anit was a list of many, many different days, many quasi-festivals, we call them, on which they were celebrated due to different events, different things that happened. Most of the things which are in Megillat Ta'anit are related directly or indirectly to the Beit HaMikdash. Different types of different forms of salvation, different forms of victories, major victories, minor victories, different things which happened. And the Gemara goes through the Megillat Ta'anit, is a list of many of these days on which one would not be allowed to fast, on which one would not give hesperim. That's why it's called Megillat Ta'anit. It's the days on which cannot be a Ta'anit. Right? If one takes on, nowadays, we don't really take on voluntary Ta'aniyot so much anymore, but once it was, when it was more commonplace, on these days, one would not be allowed to add on to have a Ta'anit, because these have the status of a sort of a Yom Tov. Now, the Gemara in Rosh Hashanah has a discussion about whether Megillat Ta'anit still applies or not, or whether it was nullified. The question is, once the Beit HaMikdash was destroyed, essentially, do the days of Megillat Ta'anit still apply? So there's a machloket, predictably. And what everybody agrees on, there are 2 days from Megillat Ta'anit which were not cancelled and which still apply, are Purim and Chanukah. we mentioned before, Purim and Chanukah were in Megillat Ta'anit. The reason is those days, there's something a little bit more. Unlike the other days, the Rabbanan added on certain mitzvot, which we'll get to in a moment, because there's a question of how can you add on mitzvot? That is going to be Baal Tosef. Right? So that the Gemara discusses already. But because we have those mitzvot, because we have Mikra Megillah, because we have the mitzvah of lighting Chanukah candles, there is already, Pirsumei Nisa, and those were kept, those were not nullified. But all the other days, which are listed in Megillat Ta'anit, most of them you probably haven't heard of because they were batel mevutal after the Chorban. And the Gemara in Rosh Hashanah, the conclusion of the Gemara is that once the Gemara asks about another 2 days which occurred, these which may have fit into the category, may have fit the criteria to be included in Megillat Ta'anit, and it says once all the previous ones were annulled, you're going to go and add new ones. So therefore, we see from there Megillat Ta'anit was annulled, and seemingly we cannot add new days. That is how the Pri Chadash passed. Pri Chadash, the important poskim in Yerushalayim a few centuries ago, he says since the annulment of Megillat Ta'anit, no longer can we add on days to the calendar. However, there are many who disagree. Khatam Sofer has a number of tshuvot where he discusses this. Not discuss Yom Ha'atzmaut because we dated Yom Ha'atzmaut, but he discusses the principles and says the Khatam Sofer, if you look carefully in the Gemara, where it talks about Megillat Ta'anit and why it was cancelled, why we cannot add new days once we no longer have Megillat Ta'anit, no longer have the Beit HaMikdash, there are really two reasons that are given in the Gemara. And depending on which reason you understand, will be a big nafka for our. One reason is that the Churban marks a certain, marks an endpoint, marks a change of status in Jewish history. Once you have the Churban, that was this event which stopped everything, which reset everything. You no longer have the ability to now come along and add in new days. That is the first reason. According to that, if that's what we say, then the Pri Chadash would be correct, and we would have to assume that. However, there is another reason which is brought. As I mentioned before, most of the days that are listed in Megillat Ta'anit, and most of the reasons for the celebratory nature of the day is to do with things which occurred with the Beit HaMikdash. Things when they were able to bring the Korbanat Tamid, when they were able to bring certain Korbanot, different things which took place within the Mikdash itself. And it doesn't make sense to celebrate, minor victories and minor salvations that took place within the Mikdash when there is no Mikdash after the Churban. And therefore, says the Gemara, all these days that are related to the salvation within the Beit HaMikdash are nullified because you have the Churban, the Beit HaMikdash has been destroyed. You can't add new days related to that. But if there is something else, if something else happens of such magnitude to Klal Yisrael, or even to specific communities, whereby there is a great salvation, that applies as much as that applies now, and we have to celebrate that and recognize that, and we can establish a certain type of Yom Tov. If you go through the poskim, you find that there are many communities where they had localized sort of. You may have heard of Purim of Frankfurt, Purim of Tripoli, different things. The Chayei Adam talks about this. Many of the Achronim discuss where in certain communities there were certain salvations, they were rescued from certain things, and they established in their community a Yom Tov for themselves. The Chayei Adam talks about this at length, that in his city there was a fire and he was saved, and on that date every year he would have a Yom Tov. Yeah. What's that? Oh yeah. There's a Yom Tov because they were in the 6th War. They were almost quite dead. So they have their own specific one. Okay. So that is one idea. So we have the Pri Chadash, who says we no longer have Megillat Ta'anit. Comes the Khatam Sofer and says actually those things in the Megillat Ta'anit which were cancelled because they're related to the Mikdash, but things which are relevant nowadays would still apply. And the truth is, we can take it one step further. That even we may not even have to go there. We may not even have to go to Megillat Ta'anit to understand. The Gemara, when it talks about Purim, talks about the question of Baal Tosef in establishing Purim, and specifically in establishing the mitzvah of reading the Megillah. There is an extra mitzvah which Chachamim added on. There is no mitzvah min Torah to read the Megillat Esther. It hadn't been written yet. So how could it be? So says the Gemara Megillah Daf Yud Daled Amud Aleph, says Tanu Rabbanan, 48 neviim v'sheva neviot nitnabu lahem l'Yisrael. We had 48 prophets and 7 female prophets for Am Yisrael. V'lo pachatu v'lo atilu ma shekatuv b'Torah. The prophets, even the neviim, do not have the authority to add in a mitzvah, to take away a mitzvah. Right? Sometimes there's a time when a prophet may be able to add in something as a hara'at sha'ah, as a one-time event that happened with Eliyahu, but not going into that now. But as a fixed principle, to add in permanently another mitzvah to the Torah, the Nevi'im do not have that jurisdiction. Mimikra Megillah, says the Gemara, except for the case of reading the Megillah. And essentially, what the Gemara is telling us, not just the mitzvah of reading the Megillah, but of establishing this extra Yom Tov, establishing this day of Purim, all that is accompanied with it. How were they able to do that? What was that based on? Why is that not a problem of Baal Tosef? So says the Gemara, my Darush, where did they learn it from?
Didn't you ask to say
yeah, but that's something else. It's true. We discussed that on Purim. There was a debate that went on between the Chachamim and between Esther. Esther said, "Write down my story." Right, and at first the Chachamim said no, and then Esther said what she said, and they said yes. But over there, even that, what did the Chachamim say? They say to Esther, "Kinat moreret lanu ben amim." You're going to cause jealousy. You're going to cause anti-Semitism. They don't say it's because it's Baal Tosef. We can't do it. Right. So why not? So Mike Darush, Amar Rabbi Chia bar Avin, Amar Rabbi Yosef ben Karcha, Ma me'avdut lechirut amrinan shira mimita lechaim lo kol shekin. So we learn out a kal v'chomer from Pesach. If on Pesach we say shira, if on Pesach we say halal, if on Pesach we have a Yom Tov to celebrate the fact that we went out from slavery to freedom, right? All the more so kal v'chomer, if you celebrate going from slavery to freedom, surely you celebrate going from death to life. That's what happened on Purim. We were not just enslaved. There was a threat. There was a decree of destruction, of annihilation of the entire Jewish people. We would have, God forbid, ceased to exist, and we were saved. Our lives were saved. Therefore, we can celebrate. Therefore, we can have a Yom Tov. Therefore, we can say halal. Again, there we read the Megillah. According to one of the explanations, the Megillah is in place of halal. But that is the Kal V'chomer which the Gemara learns out over there. Says the Chatam Sofer that this is a Kal V'chomer, is a din d'oraita. And he says that Purim and Chanukah, it's true that midrabanan, the rabbis came along and gave the exact definition in terms of how we celebrate it and what we have to do and what. But in terms of establishing the actual Yom Tov, he says there's a to celebrate. Exactly to celebrate up to the Chacham. First year when it takes place, then you have a Doraita obligation. It says every year after that you have a Dorabanan obligation. But nonetheless, that is the machloket between them. So what we see here from this Gemara, and this is really every discussion about Yom Ha'atzmaut and about Yom Yerushalayim and about halal or not halal, etc., more or less begins on this point, which is this is the basis for Yom Tov. The basis for halal is the idea there is a kal v'chomer. When we go from death to life, when we're saved from that destruction, that is just as we see from Pesach and Purim, that is grounds for establishing a Yom Tov, and that is grounds for saying halal. Again, in terms of the details exactly how and why, so there is much that is discussed in the Poskim. There are those who talk about the question of, was it salvation for the entire Jewish people or not? There are those who ask the question, did it take place by supernatural means or not? If it's an ordinary miracle, then if there's a miracle which is not derech hateva, I think it's the Chidah who writes this. He says that if you have a nes which is not derech hateva, then you can say halal. If it's a nes which is derech hateva, which is in a natural way, then not. But again, there are those who disagree. There are those who question, what's the day that we should have it? Is it this day? Is it that day? What happens when it's nidche or not? In most years, you probably noticed Yom Ha'atzmaut is nidche. It's changed because for various permutations, because of Yom HaZikaron, Yom Ha'atzmaut. This year is one of the rare occasions where Yom Ha'atzmaut we actually celebrated on Hei B'Iyar. It falls out on Wednesday. That's the only time that it works out. And another question, which many raise, is the fact that what about the fact that it is an incomplete redemption? That it is a Geulah she'eina shlema. Can you still say halal on that? Can you still celebrate the Yom Tov? The answer would be that really just about, everything that happens in life, there is something complete. There is something incomplete. I'm not sure where we have an example of something which was a complete redemption where everything was perfect. There's always something. Well, one of the fascinating halachic discussions which the poskim bring in relation to this is a Gemara in Brachot. The Gemara in Brachot says that if a person's father dies and leaves for him a great inheritance. Okay, so what bracha does he say? So we have a bracha that you say when you have good news, you say Shechianu. When you have bad news, you say Dayana Emet. So Atov Meitiv, right? So it says the Gemara that over here in this case, right, Shechianu or Atov Meitiv depends if it's just for you or for other people benefit as well. But it says if one's father dies and leaves him a great inheritance, on the fact that he died, he has to say Dayana Emet. On the good news that he received, that he's got this, that he's received a large fortune, small fortune, large fortune. He says, Atov Meitiv. And you look at the Shechianu, and you look at this and you say, how can you say Shechianu on such an occasion? And what the Gemara is telling us is that you say the bracha over the good and you say the bracha over the bad. We can recognize both things, that even when things are incomplete and even when there is tragedy that comes together with it, and even when there is what to cry about at the same time, that does not absolve us from being thankful, from being grateful for the good that we have as well. Rabbi Kenigsberg Mincha Maariv Shiur